Have you ever noticed how silence can feel louder than words? There's a strange power in holding back, in refusing to engage when someone tries to provoke or manipulate you. Think about the last time someone pushed your buttons. What if, instead of reacting, you simply stayed quiet? That pause, that deliberate silence, can unravel their entire strategy. The ancient Stoics understood this better than anyone. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that strength, it often starts with silence. Manipulators thrive on chaos. They want you to react, to get emotional, to give them something they can twist or use against you. But Stoicism teaches us something radical. Silence isn't weakness, it's a weapon. When you refuse to play their game, you take back control. Imagine standing in the middle of a storm, completely still while everything around you rages. That's the Stoic approach. By choosing not to engage, you reverse the dynamic. Suddenly, the manipulator is left scrambling, their tactics useless against your calm. This isn't just theory, it's a strategy that works. Whether it's a toxic coworker, a family member who loves drama, or even societal pressures trying to force you into conformity, silence can be your shield. But it's not about shutting down or avoiding conflict. It's about mastering your responses so thoroughly that no one can pull your strings. Over the next few minutes, we'll explore how Stoic philosophy turns silence into a superpower. You'll learn how to spot manipulation before it takes hold, how to disarm it without saying a word, and most importantly, how to reclaim your peace in a world that's always trying to provoke you. Ready to discover the quiet strength that changes everything? Let's begin. Manipulation from a Stoic perspective isn't just about lies or guilt trips, it's any attempt to hijack your inner peace by controlling your reactions. Think of it like a puppet master pulling strings, except the strings are your emotions. Epictetus put it bluntly, people are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them. In other words, manipulators don't have power over you until you hand it to them by reacting. They create chaos hoping you'll panic, argue, or seek their approval. But Stoicism flips the script. It teaches that while you can't control others' actions, you always control your response, or lack thereof. Take workplace politics, for example. A colleague might spread rumors to rattle you, or a boss might dangle praise to keep you overworking. The moment you chase their validation or snap at their provocations, you're playing their game. But what if you didn't? What if, instead of defending yourself or begging for fairness, you simply focused on your own integrity and let their tactics fizzle out? That's the Stoic secret. Manipulation only works when you fuel it. Silence in these moments isn't passive. It's a deliberate choice to starve the drama of oxygen. Now think back. When have you felt someone tugging at your emotions, maybe through backhanded compliments, guilt trips, or manufactured urgency? How did reacting or not reacting change the outcome? That awareness is your first step toward reclaiming power, because once you see manipulation for what it is, an attempt to exploit your automatic responses, you can disarm it simply by refusing to comply. And that's where true freedom begins. Silence isn't just the absence of words, it's a fortress. Seneca, one of history's greatest Stoic thinkers, called it the greatest remedy for anger. He didn't mean suppressing emotions or bottling things up. He meant the conscious choice to withhold reactions when someone tries to bait you. Picture a chess match where your opponent makes a reckless move, hoping to throw you off. If you impulsively counter, you're playing their game. But if you pause, breathe, and stay silent, you force them to sit with their own move. That's when their strategy collapses. History gives us a perfect example with Diogenes, the philosopher who lived in a barrel and mocked societal norms. When Alexander the Great, the most powerful man in the world, visited him and asked if he could do anything for him, Diogenes simply replied, "Yes. Step out of my sunlight, no groveling, no flattery, just unshakable calm." Alexander, used to people scrambling to please him, was stunned. Later, he admitted, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." That's the power of silence. It flips the script. The manipulator expects a reaction, fear, anger, submission, and when you refuse to give it, they're left exposed. Think about your own life. Recall a moment when someone pushed you, maybe with a cutting remark or a guilt trip. What happened when you reacted? Did it escalate? Now imagine if you'd said nothing, not out of fear, but from a place of unshakable calm. That silence would have been a shield, deflecting their attempt to control the situation. Manipulators rely on predictable responses. When you deny them that, their power crumbles. This isn't about freezing up or disengaging from life. It's about choosing when to speak and when to let silence do the work for you. The next time someone tries to provoke you, experiment with this. Watch their confusion when their words don't land. Feel the strength of knowing you're no longer dancing to their tune. That's Stoic silence in action, quiet, unyielding, and utterly transformative. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." That simple truth holds the key to the Stoic art of non-reaction. Because here's the reality: you can't control what others say or do, but you always control how you interpret it and whether you let it move you. Picture this: you're in a heated argument, voices rising, fingers pointing. The other person is trying to drag you into chaos, waiting for you to snap, to give them the emotional reaction they crave. But instead, you take a breath, you stay silent, not because you're afraid or unsure, but because you recognize their game. In that moment, something remarkable happens. The tension deflates. The manipulator's words hang in the air, unanswered, and suddenly they're the ones left exposed. This is the power of non-reaction. It's not about ignoring problems or avoiding conflict. It's about refusing to let someone else dictate your emotional state. Think of it like a martial arts master who doesn't resist an opponent's force but redirects it. When you withhold a reaction, you're not surrendering, you're redirecting the energy back to its source. The Stoics called this the discipline of assent, the practice of pausing before accepting or rejecting an impression. Before you react, ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Is this person's behavior a reflection of me or of them? That split-second pause is where your power lies. Consider how often we hand over control without realizing it. A rude comment ruins your mood. A passive-aggressive text sends you spiraling. But what if you treated those moments like a scientist observing an experiment? Detached, curious, unmoved, that's the Stoic shift. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, you don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. Because when you refuse to react on command, you expose the manipulation for what it is, a script that only works if you play your part. So here's a challenge. The next time someone tries to provoke you, test this. Let their words land and then let them sit. Watch what happens when their attempt to control the narrative meets silence. You might just find that the loudest statement you can make isn't a shout. It's the quiet confidence of someone who can't be shaken. There's a quiet revolution in learning how to detach, not by running from conflict, but by seeing it clearly enough to choose your battles. Epictetus put it perfectly. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That's the heart of cognitive detachment. It's not about shutting down or disconnecting from reality. It's about creating just enough space between an event and your reaction to decide, Does this deserve my energy? Think of it like a mental pause button. Someone insults you online, and your first instinct might be to fire back. But what if instead you scrolled past, not because you're afraid or indifferent, but because you recognize their words say everything about them and nothing about you? That's Stoic silence in action, a deliberate refusal to let someone else's chaos become yours. Detachment isn't cold indifference, it's clarity. Imagine standing at the edge of a rushing river. You can't stop the current, but you don't have to jump in either. The water keeps moving, but you stay grounded. That's how Stoics approach provocation. When a coworker takes credit for your idea or a stranger tries to bait you into an argument, detachment lets you ask, will reacting improve anything? Most of the time, the answer is no. The moment you see manipulation as nothing more than noise, background static you don't have to amplify, you reclaim your peace. Start small. Next time someone cuts you off in traffic or leaves a snippy comment, practice letting the moment pass without internalizing it. Watch how quickly the tension dissolves when you don't feed it. Every time you choose silence, not out of fear, but from a place of unshakable calm, you're training your mind like a Stoic. You're proving to yourself that your worth isn't tied to others' opinions, and your peace isn't theirs to take. That's the real power of silence. It's not empty, it's full of intention. Seneca once wrote that anger is like a temporary madness. It blinds us in the moment, only to leave us with regret once it fades. But silence is the antidote. It's the pause between the spark and the explosion, the space where emotional mastery takes root. Think about the last time you felt your temper flare. Maybe it was a snide remark from a colleague or a loved one pushing your buttons. In that instant, the urge to lash out feels overwhelming, almost automatic. But Stoicism teaches us something profound. Silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the presence of control. Consider the story of a CEO faced with a room of shouting investors during a crisis. Chaos swirled around her, accusations flying like arrows. But instead of matching their intensity or scrambling to defend herself, she sat perfectly still, her silence cutting through the noise. One by one, the voices around her faltered, the tension dissipating like smoke. By refusing to react, she didn't just maintain authority, she redefined the entire dynamic. Her calm became the anchor in the storm, proving that true power often lies in what you don't say. This isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending they don't exist. It's about recognizing that emotions are like waves. They rise, they crest, and if you don't fight them, they pass. Seneca called this the first movement, the initial jolt of anger or hurt that's natural and unavoidable. But the second movement, that's where choice lies. Do you let that emotion dictate your actions, or do you let it flow through you without grabbing the reins? Silence is the bridge between those two moments. So what emotions tempt you to break your silence? Is it frustration when someone dismisses your ideas? The sting of unfair criticism, or maybe the heat of indignation when you're treated unjustly? Identify that trigger, and you've found your training ground. Next time it surfaces, experiment with this. Pause, breathe, let the emotion exist without giving it a microphone. Watch how quickly its grip loosens when you refuse to feed it. Because emotional mastery isn't about never feeling, it's about never being ruled by those feelings, and silence, that's how you reclaim the throne. There's an invisible weapon hidden in plain sight, the pause. Not the awkward silence that makes us fidget, but the deliberate, calculated pause that shifts the entire momentum of a conversation. The Stoics practiced this art centuries ago, calling it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of potential challenges. They didn't just react, they trained themselves to insert space between stimulus and response, creating room for wisdom to override impulse. Picture this, you're in a high-stakes negotiation, and the other side drops an unreasonable demand. Your instinct might be to argue or concede immediately, but what if instead you let the air hang heavy for 3 seconds? That tiny window is where power changes hands. Strategic pauses work because they disrupt the rhythm of manipulation. Most people expect instant reactions: anger, defensiveness, eagerness to please. When you deny them that predictability, you force them to sit with their own words. Think of a chess player who refuses to move just because their opponent is tapping the table impatiently. The pause isn't empty, it's full of intention. In ancient Rome, senators like Cato the Younger would often respond to provocations with silence so profound it unnerved his rivals. His stillness wasn't indifference, it was a mirror reflecting their own instability back at them. Here's how to practice this today. The next time someone asks a loaded question or throws an emotional jab, count to 3 silently before responding. Use those seconds to ask yourself, is this worth engaging with? What's the wisest outcome here? You'll notice something fascinating. The person who spoke first often rushes to fill the silence, revealing their hand or backtracking entirely. Try it in low-stakes scenarios first, like a coworker's passive-aggressive email or a relative's probing question. Watch how the dynamic shifts when you're the one controlling the tempo. Negotiation experts use this tactic relentlessly. Imagine a car salesman pressuring you with, "This deal expires today." Instead of panicking, stay silent. Keep eye contact. 9 times out of 10, they'll crumble first, offering a better price or terms. Why? Because silence creates discomfort, and most people would rather negotiate against themselves than sit with uncertainty. That's the Stoic edge, turning pause into power. So here's your challenge. Before the day ends, find one conversation where you can test this. Maybe it's a heated discussion with a partner or a pushy sales call. Resist the urge to fill the silence. Let it stretch. Observe what happens when you're no longer a puppet to someone else's urgency, because mastery over words begins with mastery over the spaces between them. Stoic silence isn't about bottling up emotions or pretending they don't exist. It's about creating space to respond wisely instead of reacting blindly. Marcus Aurelius put it best: look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig. That's the key difference between mindful silence and suppression. One is a choice rooted in self-awareness, the other is fear masquerading as control. Think of it like holding a cup of hot coffee. If you grip it too tightly, you'll burn your hand. But if you hold it gently, acknowledging the heat without letting it spill, you can carry it without harm. That's how Stoics approach emotions, not by denying them, but by refusing to let them dictate their actions. Avoidance is silence with a shadow. It's when you don't speak up because you're afraid of conflict, or you swallow your feelings to keep the peace, but Stoic silence. It's clarity in action. It's knowing your worth isn't tied to someone else's opinion, so you don't need to defend it on demand. Imagine a friend who constantly interrupts you. If you stay quiet out of fear of rocking the boat, that's suppression. But if you choose silence because you realize their behavior says more about them than you, that's power. One drains you, the other fuels you. Journaling is the bridge between these two worlds. Before you decide whether to speak or stay silent, pour your raw reactions onto the page. Write down what upset you, why it stung, and what you really want to say. This isn't venting, it's excavating. Over time, you'll start to spot patterns. Are you silencing yourself to avoid discomfort, or because silence is the wisest response? The answer matters. Marcus Aurelius kept a journal for this very reason, not to dwell on emotions, but to understand them well enough to rise above them. So here's a challenge. The next time you feel the urge to stay silent, pause and ask yourself, is this fear or wisdom speaking? If it's fear, journal first. Let the words flow uncensored, then decide, because true Stoic silence isn't empty. It's the quiet confidence of someone who's already done the inner work. And that kind of silence, it doesn't just protect your peace, it commands respect. Manipulators operate like chess players who have memorized all your moves until you refuse to play by their script. They count on predictable reactions, the defensive comeback to a backhanded compliment, the frantic justification when questioned, the instant apology when guilt tripped. But silence, it's the ultimate wild card. Seneca observed, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality," pointing to a profound truth. Manipulators exploit the stories we tell ourselves about what might happen if we don't comply. Your silence shatters that illusion. Suddenly, they're standing in an empty theater performing to no one. Take high-pressure sales tactics as an example. Picture a car dealership where the salesman leans in and says, "This offer expires today. If you walk away now, you'll regret it." Most people panic, fearing loss, and sign on the spot. But what if you just didn't react? No nervous questions, no haggling, just calm silence. The salesman's script depends on your urgency, but without it, he's forced to improvise, often revealing real flexibility. "Okay, let me talk to my manager," or exposing the bluff. "Actually, we might extend the deal." The Stoics called this apatheia, not apathy, but freedom from being emotionally hijacked. When you refuse to mirror their intensity, their leverage evaporates. History's greatest manipulators, from political schemers to emotional blackmailers, share one weakness: they need you to care. Caligula ruled through terror because people feared his whims. But imagine if the Senate had met his outbursts with collective silence. No cowering, no pleading, just stillness. His power relied on their reactions. Without them, he'd have been shouting at statues. This is the manipulator's dilemma. Their tactics only work if you validate them. So here's a challenge. Recall a time someone used urgency or guilt to pressure you. Maybe it was a limited time offer or a partner's "if you loved me, you'd" statement. Now reimagine that moment with Stoic silence. No justifying, no negotiating, just observing. How might the dynamic have shifted? Because when you stop feeding their script with your reactions, they're left holding empty air. And in that space, something extraordinary happens. You reclaim not just your peace, but your power. Criticism can feel like a storm, harsh, sudden, and impossible to ignore. But what if the most powerful response wasn't defense or denial, but silence? Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who endured slavery and exile, offered a razor-sharp distinction. If someone criticizes you unfairly, it's their problem, not yours. But if the criticism is just, why resent the truth? That's the Stoic litmus test. When faced with public judgment, ask yourself, does this hold any weight? If not, silence isn't just an option, it's a declaration of sovereignty over your own worth. History gives us a masterclass in this with Eleanor Roosevelt. As First Lady, she faced relentless attacks. Cartoonists mocked her appearance, politicians scorned her activism, newspapers called her unfeminine, yet she refused to engage. Instead, she wrote in her diary, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." Her silence wasn't weakness, it was armor. By refusing to dignify baseless critiques with a response, she stripped them of power. The critics eventually exhausted themselves while her legacy only grew. But how do you tell constructive feedback from manipulation? Start with intent. Constructive criticism aims to build, manipulation seeks control. A mentor says, "Your presentation could use more data, here's why," while a manipulator whispers, "You'll embarrass yourself if you speak up." One offers a path forward, the other plants doubt. Stoic silence helps you discern the difference. When feedback lands, pause, ask, is this person invested in my growth or just their own agenda? If it's the latter, let their words dissolve like smoke. Practice this the next time you face unwarranted critique. Maybe it's a nitpicking comment online or a colleague's passive-aggressive, just kidding. Instead of rising to the bait, try an experiment. Say nothing, not a shrug, not a sigh, just stillness. Watch how uncomfortable silence makes the critic backtrack or reveal their true motives. Because when you refuse to perform the expected reaction, you expose the emptiness of their words. That's the Stoic secret. Sometimes the loudest rebuttal is the one you never voice. Silence isn't just about what you don't say. It's written in the way you stand, the way you breathe, even the way you hold your gaze. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor who led Rome through wars and plagues, knew this intimately. He wrote, "Your mind will take the shape of what you frequently hold in thought, and that shaping extends to your body. Think about it, clenched fists, a furrowed brow, a defensive cross of the arms. These are all silent screams, broadcasting tension before a single word is spoken." But Stoic calm, it's a language of its own. A relaxed posture, steady eye contact, hands resting lightly at your sides. These subtle cues telegraph unshakable composure, disarming aggression before it even begins. History offers a striking example in Cato the Younger, the Stoic senator who faced down Julius Caesar's tyranny with nothing but his presence. When Caesar demanded Cato's support, he didn't shout or gesture wildly. He simply sat perfectly still, his posture erect but relaxed, his face as unreadable as stone. That silence in his body was louder than any speech. Caesar, accustomed to groveling or defiance, found himself unnerved by neither. Cato's stillness wasn't just refusal, it was a masterclass in non-verbal sovereignty. Modern research backs this up. Studies on negotiation show that people who maintain neutral, open body language, uncrossed limbs, palms slightly visible, shoulders relaxed, are perceived as more confident and less manipulable. Aggressive postures like leaning forward or pointing trigger defensiveness, but serene stillness, it creates space for the other person's bluster to collapse under its own weight. Picture a colleague raising their voice in a meeting. If you mirror their tension, leaning in, scowling, you escalate the conflict. But if you sit back, breathe deeply, and keep your movements deliberate, you subtly shift the energy. Their outburst suddenly feels out of place, like shouting in a library. Try this today. Notice your body language the next time tension arises. Are your shoulders creeping toward your ears? Is your jaw tight? Those physical cues feed emotional reactions, creating a feedback loop. Break it by adopting what the Stoics called eustatheia, a state of balanced composure. Plant your feet firmly, relax your hands, and let your exhales be longer than your inhales. This isn't about faking calm, it's about using your body to create calm. Because when your exterior reflects stillness, your mind begins to believe it. Now consider how often we unknowingly betray our power through small gestures. A nervous tap of the fingers, a glance toward the door mid-conversation, a hesitant shrug. These micro-reactions are breadcrumbs for manipulators. But when every movement is intentional, you become a closed loop. No leaks, no tells, just quiet authority. The Stoics didn't just preach this, they lived it. Zeno, founder of Stoicism, survived a shipwreck with nothing but his philosophy. Imagine the posture of a man who's lost everything yet stands like he owns the world. That's the silent power you cultivate when your body and mind align. So here's your challenge. For the next 24 hours, treat your body language as a practice ground. In every interaction, whether with a barista or a boardroom, observe how your non-verbal cues shape the dynamic. When someone tests your patience, resist the urge to mirror their agitation. Instead, let your stillness be the mirror that reflects their chaos back at them. Because true silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's the presence of unshakable control radiating from your fingertips to your gaze. Imagine scrolling through your feed when suddenly there it is. A post designed to provoke, a comment dripping with contempt, a viral outrage storm begging for your reaction. This is where Stoic silence becomes a digital superpower. Seneca warned 2,000 years ago about the dangers of distraction, writing, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." Today, that everywhere is our screens, a relentless barrage of opinions, hot takes, and manufactured drama, all competing for your emotional bandwidth. But here's the radical truth. Every time you refuse to engage with online provocations, you're not missing out. You're opting out of someone else's script. Take the endless cycle of viral controversies. Remember the uproar over that celebrity tweet last year? Half the internet rushed to condemn, the other half to defend, while the person who posted it watched their notifications explode with glee. That's the game. Outrage equals engagement, and engagement equals profit. But what if millions had simply scrolled past? No quote tweets, no angry threads, no algorithmic fuel. The fire would have sputtered out in hours. That's the power Seneca hinted at when he wrote, "Silence is a lesson long learned through the noise of others." Online silence isn't passive, it's a boycott of the attention economy. Social media manipulates us by hijacking our tribal instincts. A divisive post triggers our urge to pick sides, to defend our tribe, to prove we're right. Platforms know this. They amplify conflict because it keeps us glued to the screen. But Stoicism offers an escape hatch. Before reacting, ask, will my comment change anything? Or is this just emotional venting dressed up as debate? Most online arguments aren't about truth, they're about ego. The person on the other side isn't a villain, they're another human being caught in the same dopamine trap. Recognizing this lets you step off the battlefield. Try an experiment this week. Audit your digital reactions. Notice which posts make your fingers hover over the keyboard. Is it political bait, family drama? That one acquaintance who always posts inflammatory takes? For each, practice the Stoic pause. Close the tab, walk away. Watch how quickly the urge to respond fades when you don't feed it. Because every unread reply, every unscrolled thread is a vote for your peace. In a world screaming for your attention, silence isn't just power, it's rebellion. There's a quiet strength in knowing when to wait, when to let time do the work for you. Epictetus, the Stoic who turned adversity into wisdom, put it plainly, no great thing is created suddenly. He wasn't just talking about building cities or writing masterpieces. He meant the slow, deliberate cultivation of inner peace. Think of silence not as surrender, but as strategy. Like a chess grandmaster who sacrifices a pawn to win the game, sometimes the most powerful move is to do nothing at all. Because while manipulators and provocateurs thrive on immediate reactions, silence forces them to play the long game, a game they rarely know how to win. History remembers the leaders who understood this. Take Queen Elizabeth I, who ruled England during a time of relentless political scheming. When her advisors pressured her to marry for political gain, she didn't argue or justify. She simply waited. Years passed. Factions grew impatient, revealing their true motives, while her silence kept her options open. By the time her reign ended, she'd outlasted every plot against her, not with armies or decrees, but with the sheer power of patience. Her silence wasn't indecision. It was a masterclass in letting others exhaust themselves. This principle applies far beyond thrones and treaties. Imagine a coworker who constantly undermines you in meetings. The temptation is to confront them publicly, to prove your point in the moment. But what if you didn't? What if instead you let their petty comments hang in the air, unanswered, while you consistently delivered excellence? Over time, their words would ring hollow, and your restraint would speak louder than any rebuttal. That's the chess-like foresight. Epictetus praised the ability to endure short-term discomfort for long-term sovereignty over your reputation and peace. The modern world trains us to crave instant resolution. A rude email demands an immediate clapback. A social media slight begs for a fiery reply. But Stoic silence asks a different question. What happens if I let this breathe? Most conflicts are like wildfires. They burn out when left without fuel. Your silence isn't just absences, it's the wind that starves the flames. So where in your life could patient silence rewrite the script? Maybe it's that family member who baits you into political arguments every holiday, or the competitor who trash talks your work, hoping you'll take the bait. Try this next time they provoke you. Notice the urge to react, then delay, not for minutes but days. Watch how often the issue resolves itself when you refuse to engage. Because manipulators rely on your impulse to defend, explain, or correct. When you deny them that, their power crumbles in slow motion. True silence isn't passive. It's the art of letting time reveal what words never could, that you are never playing their game to begin with. And that's how the quietest person in the room becomes the one who controls it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You don't have to join the dance." With those 5 words, he captured the essence of Stoic self-respect, the unshakable understanding that your worth isn't up for debate. Silence becomes power when it's rooted in this truth. Think about the last time someone crossed a line with you. Maybe a friend made a cruel joke disguised as honesty, or a coworker took credit for your idea. In that moment, reacting might feel like standing up for yourself. But what if the most powerful statement wasn't a rebuttal, but the quiet decision not to participate? That's the Stoic boundary, not just saying no with words, but with your entire presence. Consider a personal example. Imagine you've set a clear rule: no work calls after 7 p.m. Then your boss messages at 9 with quick question, and the unspoken expectation that you'll jump. Replying, even with annoyance, rewards the violation. But silence, it's a wall, not a hostile one, just an immovable one. By not engaging, you're not being rude, you're teaching others how to treat you. The Stoics called this prohesis, the inviolable space of your will. No one can disrespect you without your cooperation. Every time you withhold that cooperation through silence, you're not losing an argument, you're winning back your peace. This isn't about stubbornness or ego. It's about alignment. When you refuse to entertain what violates your values, you're not shutting others out, you're letting yourself in. Picture a museum guard standing before a priceless painting. They don't argue with visitors who try to touch the art. They simply block the path. Their silence says, "This is protected." That's the energy you channel when you meet manipulation with quiet resolve. No drama, no negotiation, just an unspoken standard that grows louder the less you explain it. Here's the challenge for the next week: treat your silence as sacred. When someone tests a boundary, whether it's a relative probing uncomfortable topics or a stranger demanding your time, pause. Ask yourself, would responding honor my self-respect or just their disregard? If it's the latter, let the moment pass without filling it. Watch how quickly people adjust when they realize your attention isn't cheap. Because true dignity doesn't shout, it doesn't have to. There's a strange paradox at the heart of silence: the quieter you become, the more you can say. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. They called it oxymora, the art of holding 2 seemingly contradictory truths at once. That silence could be both a retreat and an advance, both a shield and a sword. Think about a courtroom scene from any classic film. The lawyer paces, slamming their fist on the rail, shouting objections, but it's the witness who sits perfectly still, eyes steady, who commands the room. Their silence isn't just absence, it's presence amplified. Every word hurled at them bounces off, and in that void, the jury starts to hear something else: the truth. This is the Stoic paradox in action. Most of us assume communication requires volume, speed, urgency. We rehearse comebacks, rush to explain ourselves, fill every pause with noise. But purposeful silence, it's like turning down the static to hear the signal. Consider Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire while journaling in the quiet before dawn. His most profound insights weren't shouted from balconies. They were written in stillness where clarity outshouts chaos. Or take Epictetus, who taught that the more someone tries to provoke you, the more your silence exposes their instability. It's not indifference, it's inverse force. Now contrast that with empty chatter. Ever been trapped in a conversation where someone talks just to fill the air? Their words spill like loose change, no weight, no value, just noise. The Stoics called this a doxa, worthless opinions that clutter the mind, but strategic silence. That's currency. Imagine two diplomats negotiating. One rants, threatens, demands. The other listens, waits, and then says nothing. The tension grows unbearable. The first diplomat starts backtracking, over-explaining, revealing their hand. Silence did that. Not arguments, not clever comebacks, the absence of both. So when has silence spoken louder than words for you? Maybe it was the time you held eye contact with a friend after they betrayed you, and your quiet said everything they couldn't face. Or the moment you walked away from an online argument, leaving the other person shouting into the void. That's the paradox. By refusing to engage, you become the one who's heard most clearly. Because real power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the one sound no one can ignore, the sound of nothing at all. Group settings have a way of amplifying manipulation. What starts as one person's opinion can quickly become collective pressure, leaving you scrambling to either conform or rebel. But Stoicism offers a third path, the power of silent observation. Epictetus, who famously taught that freedom comes from distinguishing what's ours to control from what isn't, put it bluntly: if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. That's the key to navigating group dynamics. When the room leans into gossip, outrage, or peer pressure, your silence isn't just refusal, it's reclamation. Picture a team meeting where a dominant colleague pushes an idea everyone seems to instantly endorse. The nods spread like dominoes, and suddenly, you feel the weight of expectation to join in. Here's where Stoic silence becomes strategic. Instead of rushing to agree or disagree, pause, watch, notice who speaks first, who hesitates, who alters their stance to fit the mood. These patterns reveal more than words ever could. Ancient Stoics called this such attention so deliberate it borders on detachment. You're not ignoring the group, you're studying it, waiting for the right moment to engage, or not engage at all. History remembers the quiet observers. Take Thracia, a Roman senator who refused to applaud Emperor Nero's excesses. While others competed to flatter, his silence became legendary. Not defiance, not submission, just a choice to withhold participation. Over time, his restraint exposed the desperation in others' performances. Groups thrive on reactivity. Silence disrupts that rhythm. When you don't mirror the collective energy, you create space for others to question it too. Try this in your next group interaction, whether it's a family gathering or a work brainstorming session. Resist the urge to fill pauses or validate opinions automatically. Instead, notice the unspoken rules at play. Who's seeking approval, who's dominating. Which ideas gain traction not because they're best, but because no one dared to counter the momentum. Your silence here isn't passive. It's the lens that brings the entire dynamic into focus. And when you do speak, let it be deliberate. Epictetus advised, first learn the meaning of what you say and then speak. In a world where groupthink masquerades as unity, your quiet discernment becomes revolutionary. Because the loudest voices often fear silence, most it's where their influence ends and your autonomy begins. Think of your energy like a finite resource. Every word you speak, every reaction you give, drains a little more from your reserves. Seneca warned that most of what we say isn't just unnecessary, it's actively exhausting. He wrote, "The more you pour out, the less you have left," comparing wasted words to a barrel with a hole in it. And he's right. Ever notice how an hour of venting leaves you more drained than the problem itself? Or how a single argument can sap your focus for the rest of the day? That's not just frustration, it's energy bankruptcy. Now picture silence as a power-saving mode for your mind. Like a smartphone conserving battery in the background, strategic silence lets you redirect energy to what truly matters. Take burnout. Modern life pushes us to over-explain, overshare, overreact. But what if, instead of scrambling to respond to every email, every demand, every petty critique, you paused? Not out of avoidance, but preservation. A therapist once shared a client's breakthrough. She stopped justifying herself to her critical mother. No arguments, no defenses, just calm silence. Within weeks, the dynamic shifted. The mother's complaints lost their sting because they weren't being fueled by her daughter's exhaustion. That's the hidden economy of silence. It lets others spend their energy while you conserve yours. Consider how athletes use rest days to rebuild strength. Silence works the same way. Every time you withhold a reactive comment, every time you let a provocateur's words hang in the air unanswered, you're giving your mind a micro break. Over time, those small acts of restraint compound into something profound, a reservoir of clarity and calm that others can't access because they're too busy shouting. Try this experiment for one day. Track how often you speak out of obligation rather than purpose. The automatic "fine" when someone asks how you are, the reflexive apology when you're not at fault, the heated reply to a troll online. Notice the weight of those words, then imagine replacing just half of them with intentional silence, not as a wall, but as a filter, letting only what serves you pass through. Because energy isn't just about what you do, it's about what you refuse to let drain you. And sometimes the most powerful form of self-care isn't saying yes, it's knowing when to say nothing at all. Silence isn't just about withholding words, it's about making space for wisdom to enter. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor who led an empire, wrote in his private journals, "You can learn from anyone if you're willing to listen." That's the hidden power of silence as active listening. Most of us don't truly listen. We just wait for our turn to speak, rehearsing our next point while the other person talks. But Stoic silence flips that script. It's not a pause in conversation, it's the foundation of it. Consider the difference between listening to reply and listening to understand. The first is like a tennis match. You're just waiting to smack the ball back. The second is more like holding a fragile artifact. You're careful not to drop it, studying its weight and texture. A therapist embodies this perfectly. They don't interrupt clients to share their own stories or rush to fix things. They listen deeply, patiently, and that silence becomes the container where clarity forms. The client isn't just heard, they hear themselves in ways they couldn't when drowning in noise. This isn't just about therapy. Think of the last time someone vented to you. Did you jump in with advice, or did you let them unravel their own thoughts? There's a transformative moment when you resist the urge to fill the air and instead let someone's words breathe. Epictetus called this the discipline of assent, the practice of fully receiving an idea before judging it. When you listen this way, you're not just gathering information. You're giving the speaker the rare gift of feeling truly seen. Try this today. In your next conversation, focus entirely on the other person's words. Don't plan your response, don't nod mechanically, just absorb. Notice how the dynamic shifts when your silence isn't empty but attentive. You'll start catching nuances you'd normally miss, the hesitation before they mention a project, the slight change in tone when they talk about their partner. These are the unspoken truths that only silence can reveal. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, "Receive without pride, let go without attachment." That's the heart of Stoic listening. It's not passive, it's profoundly active, because when you stop competing to be heard, you become the person others want to speak to. Not for your advice, not for your opinions, but for the quiet certainty that in your presence, their voice matters. Silence makes most people uncomfortable, so uncomfortable that we'll do almost anything to avoid it. Awkward pauses in conversation get filled with nervous laughter. Elevator rides turn into weather report exchanges. Even sitting alone, we reach for phones, podcasts, anything to drown out the quiet. But why? Epictetus, the Stoic who turned his enslavement into a masterclass on inner freedom, had an answer. We fear things not because they are terrible, but because we have not examined them. In other words, it's not silence itself that unsettles us, it's the stories we tell ourselves about what it means. Maybe we worry others will think we're rude or boring, or that we've run out of things to say. Or worse, that in the absence of noise, we'll be left alone with thoughts we've been avoiding. Modern life conditions us to treat silence like a vacuum that must be filled. Open offices buzz with chatter. Restaurants blast music over diners. Social media feeds autoplay videos before we've even scrolled to them. This constant noise isn't just background, it's a barrier, shielding us from the very introspection Stoics considered essential. Think about the last time you waited in line without pulling out your phone. How long did it take before discomfort set in? That tension reveals something profound. We've been trained to fear stillness because it forces us to confront what we've been drowning out. The irony is that silence holds exactly what we're searching for when we fill the void: clarity, creativity, even connection. Studies show that just 2 minutes of intentional quiet can lower cortisol levels more effectively than listening to relaxing music. Medieval monks practiced lectio divina, reading sacred texts slowly, pausing between phrases to let meaning sink in. Japanese tea ceremonies build silence into their rituals, treating it as sacred space rather than emptiness. These traditions understood what Epictetus taught. Silence isn't something to endure, it's something to use. Here's how to reclaim it. Start small. Set a timer for 90 seconds, no phone, no distractions, just you and your breath. Notice how your mind races to fill the space. That's normal. The goal isn't to empty your thoughts, but to observe them without judgment, like clouds passing. Over time, expand those moments. Try eating one meal a week in silence, savoring each bite, or take a walk without earbuds, letting your footsteps become a meditation. The discomfort will fade as you discover what's been hiding beneath the noise, your own unshakable presence. Because here's the secret no one tells you: silence isn't empty. It's the canvas where your deepest insights appear. The next time you feel that urge to fill the quiet, resist it. Sit with the stillness instead. Let it show you what you've been too busy to hear, your own voice, clear and unedited. That's when silence stops being something to fear and starts being the most honest conversation you'll ever have. Great leaders throughout history have understood something counterintuitive, that silence often commands more respect than speeches. The Stoic emperors like Marcus Aurelius didn't rule through grand declarations or emotional outbursts. They led with a quiet, unshakable presence that made chaos unravel around them. Picture a general standing motionless on a battlefield while soldiers panic. His stillness isn't absence, it's a gravitational force pulling order from disorder. That's the essence of Stoic leadership, the ability to hold space for clarity when everyone else is drowning in noise. Consider the difference between reactive and reflective leadership. A reactive leader jumps at every crisis, mirroring the frenzy around them. They rush to respond to gossip, over-explain decisions, and let public opinion yank them in every direction. But a reflective leader, they treat silence as strategy. When Rome burned under Nero's watch, his frantic attempts to blame others only magnified the disaster. Contrast that with Marcus Aurelius during the Antonine Plague. Faced with a dying empire, he didn't grandstand or scapegoat. He journaled privately, then acted deliberately, organizing relief efforts while modeling calm. His silence wasn't indifference, it was the foundation of stability when people needed it most. Modern crisis management reveals the same pattern. Study any corporate scandal. The CEOs who survive with their reputations intact are rarely the ones delivering impassioned press conferences. They're the ones who pause, gather facts, and speak only when words carry weight. Take the 1982 Tylenol poisonings. Johnson & Johnson's CEO didn't immediately lash out at saboteurs or make promises he couldn't keep. His team worked in silent urgency, then announced a nationwide recall with such measured resolve that it's still taught in business schools today. That's the power of Stoic restraint. It transforms uncertainty into trust. So what does this mean for you? If you're aspiring to lead, whether a team, a family, or your own life, start practicing silence like a muscle. Next time you're pressured for an instant decision, try this. Wait longer than feels comfortable. Let the tension build. Observe how others reveal their true priorities when met with your stillness. Leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about creating the space for the right ones to emerge. Because when you refuse to be rushed, you teach people how to treat you, not as another voice in the crowd, but as someone who speaks only when it matters. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary?" That question cuts to the heart of why Stoics valued silence in the pursuit of truth. Gossip, rumors, half-heard stories, they're like wildfire, spreading faster the more we fan them with our words. Picture a bustling office where someone whispers, "Did you hear about the layoffs next month?" By lunch, it's become the CEO's shutting down the department, and by day's end, people are polishing resumes over unverified fears. This isn't just harmless chatter, it's emotional pollution. The Stoics saw silence as a filter, a way to let the sediment of misinformation settle before speaking. Truth requires patience. Think of a courtroom where witnesses swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. That oath exists precisely because human nature bends reality with every retelling. Seneca observed, "A rumor goes as far as it's carried," comparing lies to birds that only fly when given wings. Every time we repeat unverified claims, we become those wings, but silence, it grounds the rumor mid-flight. When confronted with juicy gossip, the Stoic response isn't prudishness, it's curiosity. What's the source? Have you seen evidence? These questions, asked calmly, expose how little most rumors rest on. History offers a stark lesson in the Roman Senate, where whispers could end careers. When false accusations flew, the philosopher Thrasea wouldn't engage. He'd simply stop attending debates, his silence a louder rebuke than any speech. His stillness forced gossips to confront the emptiness of their words. Modern research echoes this. Studies show misinformation spreads primarily through people who share without pausing to verify. The antidote isn't complicated, it's the 3-second rule. Before passing on any claim, stop, breathe, ask Marcus Aurelius' question, is this necessary? Try an experiment this week. Next time someone shares shocking news, whether a celebrity breakup or workplace drama, resist the urge to amplify it. Instead, practice active skepticism. That's interesting. Where did you hear that? Often, you'll trace the trail back to "someone said" or "I saw online." That's the moment your silence becomes a wall, stopping the rumor's momentum dead. Because truth isn't just about what we say, it's about what we refuse to endorse with our voice. In a world drowning in noise, selective silence is how we surface what's real. It's not about knowing everything, but about honoring what we do know by never lending our words to what we don't. As Epictetus put it, if you want to improve, be content to seem clueless about what others claim to know. Sometimes the wisest thing to say is nothing at all. Seneca once described mornings as sacred ground, the quiet hours where you set the tone for everything to come. He wrote, "Begin at once to live and count each day as a separate life." For the Stoics, this wasn't just poetry, it was practice. They understood that how you start your day determines whether you'll spend it reacting to chaos or moving through it with purpose. That's where the ritual of silence comes in, not as some mystical vow of stillness, but as a deliberate pause, a way to arm yourself before the world starts making its demands. Imagine waking up and reaching for your phone immediately. The notifications flood in: emails, news alerts, social updates, and just like that, your mind is already racing before your feet even touch the floor. Contrast that with a morning where the first 5 minutes belong to no one but you. No screens, no chatter, just you and the quiet. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of challenges. It's not about dwelling on worst-case scenarios, but about grounding yourself so thoroughly that whatever comes later can't shake you. Here's how to build your own ritual. Set aside 5 minutes, no more, no less, right after you wake. Sit somewhere comfortable, but not so cozy you'll drift back to sleep. Close your eyes and focus on your breath, not to empty your mind, but to notice what's already there. Are you anxious about a meeting, annoyed by something someone said yesterday? Let those thoughts pass like clouds. The goal isn't to fix anything yet. It's to witness your mind before the world starts shouting over it. Seneca did this daily, often writing in his journals during these quiet hours. He wasn't just thinking, he was listening to himself. That's the key difference between silence and emptiness. One is passive, the other is deeply active. When you practice morning silence, you're not just avoiding noise, you're reclaiming the right to hear your own voice before anyone else's gets a turn. Try this for a week, 5 minutes, no distractions. Notice how it changes the way you engage with everything that follows. The coworker who tries to bait you into office drama. You'll catch the impulse to react before it takes over. The endless stream of bad news online, you'll scroll past, not out of indifference, but because you've already decided what deserves your energy. That's the power of a silence ritual. It doesn't just prepare you for the day. It reminds you who's running it. Forgiveness often feels like a conversation we need to have. Apologies demanded, explanations given, wounds dissected word by word. But what if the deepest healing happens not in dialogue, but in silence? Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who transformed suffering into wisdom, offered a radical perspective. Forgiveness is better than revenge, for forgiveness sets the prisoner free, and that prisoner is you. He wasn't talking about grand gestures or heartfelt talks. He meant the quiet, daily choice to release a grudge without fanfare, to let resentment dissolve in the space between thoughts. Think about the last time someone wronged you, the heat of anger, the scripts running through your mind, what you'd say if given the chance. Now imagine something more powerful, saying nothing at all. Not out of weakness, but from the unshakable understanding that your peace isn't negotiable. Revenge is loud. It demands recognition, a balancing of scales, an admission of fault. But silent forgiveness, it's the ultimate act of sovereignty. Picture two neighbors feuding over a property line. One spends years dragging the other to court, obsessing over every inch. The other stops arguing, plants a garden where the dispute began, and tends it in silence. Which one truly owns the land? The Stoics would argue it's the one who refuses to let conflict define them. Silence in forgiveness isn't surrender. It's the refusal to let someone else's actions dictate your inner world. I once watched a friend navigate betrayal with this kind of quiet strength. Her business partner emptied their accounts and vanished. Everyone expected rage, lawsuits, public shaming. Instead, she closed the books, filed the necessary reports, and never spoke his name again. Years later, someone asked if she'd forgiven him. Her reply, "I didn't have to, I just stopped keeping score." That's the essence of Stoic forgiveness, not a dramatic reckoning, but the slow, silent unraveling of the story you've been telling yourself about what was owed. So consider this: where in your life could silence do the work words never could? Maybe it's the relative who always plays the victim, or the ex who still lives rent-free in your head. What if, instead of rehearsing conversations that'll never happen, you simply stopped, not pretending the hurt doesn't exist, but no longer feeding it with your attention? Because grudges are like plants, they only grow when watered. Silence is the drought they can't survive. Epictetus would remind us that the person who wronged you likely forgot the incident the next day. Why are you still carrying it? Sometimes forgiveness isn't something you declare. It's something you notice one morning, like the absence of an old ache you'd grown used to. That's when you realize the silence wasn't empty, it was healing all along. Even the Stoics, masters of restraint, knew the power of a well-timed silent jab. There's a playful irony in using quiet as both shield and punchline, turning silence into the ultimate mic drop. Take Diogenes, the philosopher who lived in a barrel and treated social norms like optional suggestions. When a pompous orator boasted about his flawless speechcraft, Diogenes simply ate a lentil stew, slurping loudly mid-speech. No rebuttal, no argument, just the absurdity of the moment hanging in the air. The crowd erupted in laughter, and the orator's grandstanding collapsed under the weight of its own seriousness. That's Stoic humor in action, exposing absurdity not with words, but with the deliberate absence of them. Silence can be the sharpest punchline to sarcasm. Imagine someone tosses a backhanded compliment your way. "Wow, you're so productive for once." Instead of biting or firing back, try this. Stare blankly for 3 seconds, then slowly return to what you are doing. The combination of non-reaction and exaggerated indifference flips the script. Suddenly, their attempt at wit becomes a one-man show with no audience. Seneca, who famously advised, "Lighten your troubles with laughter," would approve. He once deflected an insult about his modest home by quipping, "If my walls could talk, they'd still have less to say than your mouth." But even he knew silence often lands the joke better. History's archives brim with these quiet zingers. When Alexander the Great asked the cynic philosopher Crates if he'd like his destroyed hometown rebuilt, Crates just shrugged and kept mending his cloak. His silence said everything. Some things aren't worth the effort, even for kings. Modern life offers endless opportunities to borrow this tactic. That co-worker who jokingly needles you about taking vacation days. Try responding with a slow sip of coffee and raised eyebrows. The relative who loves passive-aggressive digs about your life choices. A thoughtful nod followed by changing the subject to the weather. The more they squirm to fill the void, the funnier it gets. Here's your challenge. Next time someone tries to bait you with sarcasm, resist the urge to match their energy. Instead, lean into the pause. Let their words echo awkwardly. Watch as the tension becomes comedy gold. because the real power of Stoic silence isn't just in refusing to engage, it's in revealing how little their words deserve a response. And sometimes the best punchline is the one you never say out loud. Marcus Aurelius once scribbled in his journal, "Our life is what our thoughts make it." That simple truth holds the key to why silence isn't just useful in decision-making, it's revolutionary. Imagine standing at a crossroads, pressure mounting, voices around you clamoring for quick answers. The modern world worships speed, instant replies, snap judgments, impulsive buys. But the Stoics built empires by doing the opposite. They practiced what Marcus called the discipline of assent, the art of pausing before allowing any thought to become action. That pause, that sacred silence between stimulus and response, is where real choices are made. Take money, for example. Picture walking into a car dealership, the salesperson flashing numbers, insisting this is a once-in-a-lifetime deal. Your pulse quickens, the logical brain gets drowned out by urgency. Now imagine inserting a single silent minute, no talking, no calculating, just you and your breath. In that space, clarity emerges. Maybe the car isn't the issue. Maybe it's the fear of missing out or the desire to impress someone who won't even notice. Stoic silence cuts through the noise, separating genuine need from manufactured desire. History's greatest decisions were forged in quiet. When George Washington faced mutiny among his troops, he didn't rant or beg. He reached for his glasses, paused, and said simply, "Gentlemen, you will permit me to put on my spectacles, for I have grown not only gray but almost blind in service to my country." That silence before speaking, where he could have shouted, crushed the rebellion without a single weapon. The troops wept. His restraint, not his words, carried the weight. So how do you bring this into daily life? Start small. Next time you're about to hit buy now on an impulse purchase, close the tab. Walk away for 10 minutes of pure silence, no podcasts, no music, just you and the question, do I want this, or does the algorithm want me to want it? Or when a colleague demands an instant answer, try this. Let me reflect on that. 4 words that shift the power dynamic entirely. The irony, silence in decision-making feels like inaction, but it's the most potent action of all. It's the difference between being swept downstream and planting your feet in the riverbed, letting the current rush past while you stand firm. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire with this practice. You might not be managing legions, but your choices made in stillness rather than frenzy will shape a life far beyond what outside noise could ever design. Silence has a way of revealing truths that words often obscure. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who turned adversity into wisdom, taught that discernment begins with stillness. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. That's not just a clever saying, it's a strategy. When you refuse to fill the air with reactions, you create a mirror, and in that reflection, others show you exactly who they are. Think of it like an interrogation room in a crime drama. The detective doesn't argue with the suspect. They let silence stretch until the uncomfortable void forces the truth to spill out. Your stillness works the same way. Manipulators operate like actors who need an audience. Without your reactions, your anger, your explanations, your eager nods, their performance falls flat. A toxic coworker drops a snide remark and waits for you to bristle. A family member needles you with guilt trips, anticipating your apologies, but when met with silence, their masks slip, some double down, escalating their behavior until their desperation becomes obvious. Others backtrack, revealing the fragility behind their bravado. The silence doesn't judge or accuse, it simply illuminates. Like sunlight exposing dust motes in the air, stillness reveals the motives hidden beneath the noise. Consider how children test boundaries. They'll push, whine, or act out precisely because they've learned it gets a response. Parents who react inconsistently, sometimes scolding, sometimes giving in, create chaotic cycles. But those who respond with calm consistency, their silence becomes a boundary as solid as a brick wall. Adults aren't so different. The colleague who forgets to credit you in meetings, the friend who always cancels last minute, they're testing too. Your silence teaches them what works and what doesn't, not through lectures but through the absence of reward. Here's your challenge. Next time someone's behavior feels off, experiment with this mirror. Don't confront, don't justify, just observe. Watch how they fill the silence. Do they deflect with humor, gaslight with false concern, or maybe, just maybe, they pause too, and real conversation begins? Because when you stop feeding the dance, you get to see who's been leading it all along. And that's when silence stops being passive and starts being the most revealing conversation you'll ever have. History rarely remembers those who shouted the loudest. It remembers those whose silence carried weight long after their voices fell quiet. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. They taught that true influence isn't forged in the heat of grand speeches or dramatic displays, but in the steady, unbroken thread of quiet integrity. Marcus Aurelius didn't build his legacy by demanding reverence. He earned it by journaling in the dark before dawn, wrestling with his own humanity so he could lead an empire with clarity. His words weren't etched into monuments but into the private pages of Meditations, a book that would guide generations precisely because it was never meant to be read aloud. Contrast that with the modern obsession with visibility, the pressure to broadcast every thought, every victory, every fleeting emotion. Social media rewards the loudest takes, the hottest reactions, the most exaggerated claims. But the Stoics measured impact differently. They asked, what remains when the noise fades? Think of the difference between a firework and a lighthouse. One dazzles for seconds, then vanishes in smoke. The other burns steadily, silently, saving lives long after its builders are gone. That's the power of silent influence. It doesn't clamor for attention, it earns it by being undeniable. Consider the story of Rosa Parks. Her defiance wasn't a shouted manifesto or a viral rant. It was a quiet refusal, a single wordless act that echoed louder than any slogan. By simply staying seated, she exposed the absurdity of an unjust system. The Stoics would call this parrhesia fearless truth-telling, not through volume but through unshakable presence. Parks didn't need to explain her dignity, her silence was the explanation. And that's why her legacy endures, because it wasn't tied to the fleeting heat of a moment, but to the depth of a principle that couldn't be shouted down. So what's your silent legacy? Not the post you'll share today or the arguments you'll win this week, but the choices you make when no one's watching. The patience you show a struggling coworker without expecting praise. The honesty you practice when lying would be easier. The integrity you keep when compromise would be convenient. These are the things that outlast trends because they don't depend on applause, they depend on who you become when the room is empty. As Epictetus put it, character isn't formed in crisis, it's displayed there. The world will always reward noise, but history reserves its deepest respect for those whose silence spoke volumes. Silence isn't something you stumble into, it's something you build brick by brick in the ordinary moments of your day. Seneca's letters overflow with this idea. Progress happens in inches, not leaps. He wrote, "Every day, every hour, see that you do what you have in hand with dignity and composure." That's the heart of daily Stoic silence, not grand gestures, but small, intentional pauses that train your mind to resist the pull of reactivity. Start with something simple, a single meal in silence. No podcast, no scrolling, no background TV, just you and the act of eating. Notice how your mind rebels at first, itching to fill the space with distraction. That discomfort is the point. You're not just eating quietly, you're rewiring your relationship with stillness itself. Ancient Stoics called this ascesis, deliberate practice. It's like muscle memory for your attention. Every bite taken without distraction is a rep in the gym of your mind. Seneca took this further with what he called his evening review. Before sleep, he'd revisit his day in silence, asking, "Where did I react without thinking? Where did noise drown out wisdom?" No self-judgment, just observation. Try this for 5 minutes tonight. Keep a journal by your bed and jot down one moment where silence could have been your ally. Maybe it was the email you rushed to answer or the gossip you almost joined. Awareness is the first step toward change. Now let's talk about response delays. Modern life demands instant reactions, texts, emails, comments, as if urgency equals importance. But Stoic silence thrives in the gap between impulse and action. Set a rule: for every non-urgent message, wait at least 30 minutes before replying. Use that window to ask, does this require my energy? You'll start noticing how many emergencies dissolve when given space. The Roman statesman Cato practiced this by pausing before every decision, even mundane ones, to ensure his actions aligned with his principles. For those craving deeper practice, schedule silent sprints. 1 hour a week, phone off, door closed, dedicated to tasks without verbal or digital noise. Read, walk, sketch. The goal isn't productivity, it's recalibrating your tolerance for stillness. Like Seneca writing letters by candlelight, these pockets of quiet become laboratories for self-mastery. Finally, track your progress, not with rigid metrics but with curiosity. After a week of silent meals, do you catch yourself reaching for your phone less? After evening reviews, do you pause more often before speaking? These subtle shifts matter. The Stoics didn't measure growth in grand declarations, but in the accumulation of quiet victories. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the art of living is more like wrestling than dancing. You have to stand firm and watch for your opportunity. Your opportunity begins the next time silence feels uncomfortable. That's your cue to lean in. Silence in the hands of a Stoic isn't just the absence of noise, it's the presence of an unshakable inner citadel. Over the last few minutes, we've explored how this ancient practice dismantles manipulation, not through force, but through the quiet refusal to play the game. Remember Marcus Aurelius' words from the beginning: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Now you see the full weight of that truth. Every time you choose stillness over reaction, you're not avoiding conflict, you're redesigning the battlefield. The coworker who thrives on drama, your silence drains their stage of oxygen. The relative who weaponizes guilt, your calm exposes their tactics as the empty performances they are. Even the endless scroll of online outrage loses its grip when you stop feeding it with your attention. Think back to the key moments we've uncovered. How silence reveals truth like sunlight revealing dust in the air. How it flips power dynamics, leaving manipulators scrambling when their scripts fail. How it conserves your energy like a battery in power-saving mode. Most importantly, how it's not about suppressing emotions, but mastering the space between feeling and action. That pause, whether it's 3 seconds or 3 days, is where your freedom lies. It's the difference between being a puppet jerked by invisible strings and becoming the puppeteer who cuts them with a single act of restraint. Marcus Aurelius didn't just write about silence, he lived it. Facing wars, betrayals, and plagues, his journal wasn't a record of complaints, it was a toolkit for clarity. When he reminded himself, the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts, He was pointing to the ultimate Stoic superpower, the ability to filter the world through stillness rather than noise. That's the invitation here, not to mute your life, but to turn down the volume on everything that doesn't serve your peace. So here's your challenge: start small. One silent meal, one unanswered provocation, one deep breath before replying to that frustrating email. Notice how these tiny acts of restraint compound into something extraordinary, a life where you're no longer easily hijacked. And when you're ready, share your stories below. When did silence become your shield, your rebellion, your punchline? Because the quietest revolutions often start with a single person refusing to dance to the world's chaos. And that person, it's you.